From South Carolina, I will now recognize the ranking member, the gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to try to clarify some of the points that have been made throughout the debate. The gentlewoman from Wyoming raised Mr. Baranovic's writings laying out his position with respect to the fringe legal theory about invasion that we've seen pressed in this hearing. And we continue to want to point out that this is a political argument, that it is not a constitutional argument, and I would seek unanimous consent to place on the record the article in the Arizona Mirror from July 7, 2022, when Mr. Baranovich laid out his position entitled, "Baranovich Lagging in the Polls Begs Ducey to Declare an Invasion to Militarize the Border."
Without objection.
Thank you. I know Mr. Jadwat was asked some questions about whether there was a contradiction between the clear language of the Constitution and the Supreme Court's holdings, saying that the federal government has sole authority over issues regarding immigration and admission to this country. And he was asked whether the use of the National Guard in California to address smuggling and distribution of fentanyl in that state somehow was contradictory there. Now, I know that we don't have before us the exact terms there, but is there a distinction, Mr. Jadwat, between the federal supremacy on issues of border security and immigration and the state's ability to enforce criminal laws within their own state that do not directly address border security?
Yes, there is. The states obviously have, criminal laws of their own and the ability to enforce them.
So if someone brings fentanyl into the country and then seeks to distribute it in California, California would be justified in trying to stop that distribution in its state?
Yeah, I assume that's illegal under California law, yeah.
You've been asked a lot of questions about the meaning of invasion, and many of those questions have kind of run roughshod over the constitutional meaning, the constitutional history. Can you just lay out one more time what the constitutional meaning is and the historical context for the invasion clause?
Sure, and again, I mean, the reference to invasion that folks are relying on here is actually, an exception to the rule, right? Actual invasion. The main point of the Compact Clause is that states can't engage in war or do any of that other long litany of things, that's a federal responsibility, right? And so the exception, in order for the clause itself to make sense, can't be so broad that it swallows the rule. The theory that they're putting forward here of an unreviewable ability of any governor to point to pollution, to point to gangs, to point to people coming in and say, voila, invasion, I get to wage war, would completely undermine the main purpose of the Compact Clause. And with respect to Mr. Brnovich, when Madison talked about pirates, he wasn't purporting to define what an invasion was at all, much less an invasion under that clause of the Constitution. When Madison did talk about the invasion clause and immigration, he said that immigration was not an invasion. He said that invasions that require the war power and immigration are distinct things. And so there's no contemporary support for their position at the time, at the founding. The text obviously doesn't support what they're saying, and the implications of their argument, which again, nobody has purported to address on this panel, are really breathtaking and, would really undermine our entire constitutional system.
I appreciate that, and if we do turn back to the actual clause in the Constitution, it talks about the obligation of the federal government, not the administration. And so our continuing concern is that we're in a situation here where our colleagues are blocking legislation that would allow the federal government to address issues of border security, and they're blocking funding that would allow the administration to address border security, and then placing us in this position where they then flip it and try to argue. I do want to thank Representative Ms. McClintock for pushing back on this deeply disturbing idea that the federal government is bound by the determination of individual states in interpretation of the Constitution. Again, that would completely upend our constitutional order. I see my time has expired, so I would yield back.